So with this, I'm gonna get us kicked off here, and I'm going to turn us over to our the chair of our Government Affairs Committee, Rick Starboard.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone. Happy New Year. It's good to see you all. It's chilly morning. We can see who's on the screen with us this morning. We just go around the room real quick and introduce ourselves. I'll start. I'm Rick Starboard, Rick's Auto Collision and the Ward 2 City Councilor.
Chris Bibby Real Estate.
Jose Gonzalez, I work for North Shore Community College.
Adam Cutler, North Shore Community College.
Christine Pierce, Columbia Insurance Agency.
Jim Keeley, K Security Systems.
Andrew DeFranco, Harbor Light Homes, formerly Harbor Light Community Partners.
Aaron Clausen, Lynn Principal Planner.
Okay, great. And once again, welcome everyone. So this morning we have Aaron Clausen from the Planning Department with us to give his, I don't know if it's annual or semi-annual development update.
Whatever you ask me.
I know it's at last week's economic development meeting, Jim Cowdell from EDIC was the speaker and touched on some things going on in the city. And Aaron, if you could enlighten us to what's ahead this year.
Sure. All right. Thank you. So I'm this meeting, or my invitation this meeting was kicked off by a conversation between me and Colin to hopefully talk to you a little bit about the RAISE grant that MassDOT had received from the federal government. This is a $20 million grant to redo Lynnway. We talked something like 3-4 months ago about that award, and thought it might be an opportunity around this time of year to update everybody where that's at, what's it about, what the process might be. Unfortunately, we haven't heard much from MassDOT on what the process is, who's even going to be the project manager. Is it MassDOT? Is it MBTA? Is it DCR who actually owns Lynnway? What's the structure of that partnership, Lynn's role, the region's role? So I don't have a lot to talk about. I can hit a little bit as we get into the presentation, but given the lack of information where we're at, I thought what I would do is sort of transition and talk a little bit about waterfront redevelopment and sort of a lot of the more recent actions and activities that are moving things there. I know Jim, when he was last week, talked about a lot of the private investment that's going on in the city, in particular the waterfront. And this might be a good opportunity to see what's happening on the public sector side and how public investment is driving that sort of nation of the waterfront. So that's the topic area for today. And, I'll let Colin, are you gonna drive the bus with?
I can, or I can let you. It's your choice.
Whichever is easier. So if you just mind. So while Colin's pulling that up, the sort of frame of focus for this conversation today, and please keep this, if you have questions, don't feel that you can't interrupt. But the sort of the frame of focus is to talk about the Harbor Park and sort of where we're at with that project and how it fits in with the broader vision of the waterfront. And I think really the whole city's economic development strategy. So Colin, if you don't mind, zipping through, that is sort of the central figure right now in that development process. There are a number of other public infrastructure investments that are going on right now, will be going on in the next year to two, that are derived from the planning work that the city has done in the past years to drive again redevelopment and also drive private investment. And then sort of transition into some future planning processes to kind of keep that momentum going and bring a little bit more focus on that redevelopment and really kind of try to make sure that we have a comprehensive whole going forward. So this is a view of what is now currently a municipal landfill. I think pretty much everybody in the room knows what this is, but it's a legacy municipal landfill that's been there for a long time. And currently right now, this is actually a view from the shoreline. As you can tell, that is what is a remnant of Riley Way. whoever took this picture is standing on what was the shoreline probably about 15 years ago. So we do see rapid erosion happening there. But this the city was presented with a pretty unique opportunity several years back to enter into a public-private partnership to take a privately directed landfill cap repair project and think about how could we enter into a 3P partnership to redevelop it into a public park, signature waterfront public park. And thereby creating something like 30 plus acres of a signature park on the waterfront, creating nearly a quarter of a mile, over a quarter of a mile of shoreline access to the community. And then I think importantly for the conversation here is drive economic development on the waterfront, drive that redevelopment concept. And in doing so, do something that's different than South Boston redevelopment, and that South Boston has been incredibly successful. There's no denying the amount of investment that's going on there. But I think one of the drawbacks, the critiques is that that has occurred without much public benefit. And this is trying to flip that strategy to ensure that the public benefit is driving that redevelopment. There's not much water, there's not much open space, there's not much community access to the South Harbor waterfront. It's all private for very, very wealthy businesses and households. There's not really community access to that waterfront. Now they're doing a lot to fix that, and they have a lot of resources to do so. But we're trying to get ahead of that here with this project. Yeah. So again, just for some context, this is the project site. You can kind of see the area. It was the former landfill. As you head kind of north towards the National Grid properties, that is a former gasification site there. As part of the project that Chartered Environmental had taken on around 2019, they purchased the land to repair a failing cap on the landfill. So the cap here was degraded. There was erosion, and solid waste was essentially running into the water when we had a raining event. The portion to the north that is vegetated was part of the former coal gasification plant and had some serious amount of PCBs. So part of the repair project was to remediate that and bring it into the larger site for capping, and is it enabling us to sort of think about how can we piggyback on the timing of that project so that when they rebuild the cap, when they place it on top of the solid waste, it can accommodate essentially draping a park on top of that. So that was the opportunity that was presented to the city. And then you can see also the shoreline here is along Raleigh Way as an opportunity to provide food access to the shoreline. I won't hit a lot of the development projects that Jim talked about last week, but you can see in the south, I guess, west corner of this, to the left, the Linmark project which is under construction right now. This 50 units of housing going on there. Further to the south of the South Harbor, which would be another mixed-use project, creating over 150 units with some commercial and activating some ground floor space. And then as you head up towards Linway, the old Gorelick site was purchased by A.W. Perry about a year ago. They are a partner in this project. I can talk a little bit more about that. But that's the area that is envisioned as more of a job creation center, less housing, but more, light manufacturing, advanced manufacturing, R&D at some point in the future, getting into the life science sector. So you can see how this can be sort of a fulcrum of activity and driving economic development on the waterfront. So I'm just going to go back a little bit. How we got here. This is an image from the open space waterfront master plan. It was started in around 2017 and completed about a year later. Along with this planning process was also the waterfront master plan update that was completed by UTO. That was really looking more at the land use dynamic and creating a land use redevelopment strategy that could go along with an open space plan. And together, they were intending to create a new flexible strategy to redevelop the waterfront that allowed for incremental redevelopment. So in 2007, very original, had some pretty big moves and utilized unique land use transfer development rights kind of concepts, which is very kind of high level thinking in redevelopment, but also very complicated. And so that sort of what happened was that plan sat on the shelf for a long time. The challenge with the municipal harbor plan in that aspect, when it's sort of crafted in that way, is it's also a regulatory document. It's one of the few plans in Massachusetts that actually has a regulatory outcome, meaning you have to meet that plan under the Chapter 91 license process. So around, I think it was 2014 or 15, I'm going to probably get my dates a little wrong here, but the Beacon Chevrolet site came up and the redevelopment opportunity there for the breakwater arrived, and it was not exactly aligned with the 2007 plan because that area there where Beacon Chevrolet is at the Inner Harbor was envisioned as a signature open space site for the city. And Mass DEP, who oversees the Chapter 97 process, Chapter 91 process, basically says you can't do that. You have a plan that says it's going to be open space. So the city worked closely with the secretary to get some special dispensations, not exactly what you call it, but and that project moved forward, was allowed to move forward as long as the city changed, redid their municipal harbor plan, replaced a location for the signature waterfront space, and then came up with a redevelopment strategy that was more flexible and feasible. And so this plan, the open space plan, and the master plan update were two efforts to sort of do a revised municipal harbor plan that would work. But I just wanted to show this for a couple things. One, it's pretty evident here that open space is used as sort of the as the connecting tissue for redevelopment on the waterfront. You can see here in the center here, that big open space is where the landfill is, and it is the replacement of the signature waterfront location on North Harbor. But throughout, there is this sort of network of open spaces and pathways that connects it up to create sort of a logical framework for redevelopment along that. And this is a couple of graphics from the master plan update. On the left, you can see sort of the land use framework. There's some cross connections across the Linway to ensure that the redevelopment of the waterfront is connected to the rest of the city. It's porous, it needs to be porous, but it's going to be an active mixed-use neighborhood. But one of the key things that you see here is that it is very sort of, it alludes to what the neighborhood could be. It's not so specific like the Sasaki plan. And it recognizes the fact that the central part of the waterfront, the purple area, is industrial in character. You've got the wastewater utility facility. You have a lot of legacy manufacturing and heavy industrial types of uses. And that's not likely to change. What the wastewater treatment facility is never going to move. It is where it is. And so it's recognizing that and building off that sort of that dynamic. And so the redevelopment you see as it radiates out from that central waterfront is a little bit more focused on light manufacturing and R&D, sort of the lighter purple. And then as you radiate north and south, you get more mixed commercial with residential. And then you arrive at South Harbor and then the Inner Harbor with a mixed use focus on residential. And so it envisions, I think, it envisions a redevelopment that recognizes the existing context. I think it's also important because it recognizes the need for business and commercial uses that drive job creation. And then in my view, any good, active, resilient neighborhood has a mix of uses. It's not just a residential neighborhood. It has commercial uses. So that was the vision that was outlaid in the master plan. To the right is sort of just a formulation of what that could look like. You can kind of see there how the Harbor Park is sort of a centerpiece, but around it you see that redevelopment taking place. One thing I'll point out along the Linway, one of the challenges with the master plan update is it really never gave us a true vision for what that street should look like. How do we connect clearly the waterfront redevelopment with the rest of the city? How does it connect up to the Gearworks site, which is the sort of that redevelopment to the left on the edge? If you could circle that. Thanks, Colin. Appreciate that. That's the concept that Mr. Patsios has put together with his development team. So, one thing I'll just point out that's missing, and it's not a critique of the plan per se, you have to pick an edge at some point. There's always got to be a limit of your scope. Is how do those development opportunities connect together? And I'll revisit that comment a little bit later.
I was gonna just ask on the Linway, there's obviously the crossing points and there's circles. Do those circles imply pedestrian crossways?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, those are envisioned in the plan as sort of key gateways or points of access to the waterfront. So those two plans were codified into the revised municipal harbor plan that was signed by the Secretary of EEA, which is what's required regulatory document in 2020. It's really important because it ensures those open spaces that were envisioned, particularly along the shoreline, will be delivered, whether it's through a public-private partnership like at Harbor Park or privately through the Chapter 91 process. So South Harbor, when that project gets redeveloped, it's going to have to provide a significant waterfront open space with their licensing that will connect up to this property. So right, this is
That's the O'Donnell site.
correct. Yeah. I'll just go back real briefly. You can kind of see in the bottom end there. Maybe it's better to go back to this picture. You can kind of see how it wraps around towards the mouth of the Saugus River. The municipal harbor plan requires that park is delivered for the redevelopment, so we can ensure we're getting these connections. So around 2020, one of the first things that it was a task to me when I started with the city was to work with the state and Charter Environmental to come up with a master plan for the park itself. So recognizing again that there's an opportunity to think about how do we cap that landfill to allow for reuse on top of it. So a number, community engagement, number of public meetings, we arrived at this master plan. And you can kind of see here, it's a little bit hard to read in plan, but the Harbor Park is centered by the landfill. So this is essentially the limits of where the landfill is. Primarily the park program there is passive recreational trails, additional landscaping, some meeting spaces for people when they get to the top to get some views of the city. But around the edges, there are opportunity where it flattens out a little bit to create some other active recreational uses, particularly on the right side of this plan. You can see maybe it's hard to see, but there's some basketball courts, futsal courts, things like that, soccer field, to provide active recreational opportunities for the community. And then as you wrap around the shoreline, the promenade, which was a key kind of infrastructure element of the open space plan, runs along the shoreline, would eventually connect up with the South Harbor project, bridge you all the way up to Heritage State Park in the Inner Harbor. And then on the left side of this is, again, it's a flatter area, but another opportunity to have some more active recreational uses, playgrounds, you could a little cafe there, you activate the space. But this created essentially a vision for what the master plan could be for the site, what the park could be, and feeds into the design and engineering of the cap so that we can essentially drape over the landscape on top of this park. Oops.
Is the landfill currently, is the landfill currently already capped and we're now just putting in more or less the topsoil?
That's a great question. No, it's not. So the Charter Environmental, which is the private organization who owns they purchased the property. They are acting on the consent order that basically the state issued a consent order saying that they have to fix this problem. So what they've been doing for the last couple of years, I'm sure everybody's noticed, the landfill has been getting taller. As part of the capping project, to fund that work, they bring in more solid waste material, or it's actually soil, it's not even solid waste, soil to fund the capping, the recapping of that. So they're at a stage where they're done bringing in the material, and the design for the cap actually is taking place right now. So under their current solid waste license, they would be capping it at this moment. They're not doing that while we finish the design and engineering and then permitting for that cap, because it's going to be a different matrix.
All right, so they're gonna cap it and then
And then
add
put
more
some,
material.
exactly.
Now, was there a mandate that it went as high as it did?
Yes. Yeah, so their solid waste permit that they sought, it was 2020 when it was issued, essentially set the height of the landfill and the amount of material that could come in to the site, and that's part of their solid waste. That was going to happen whether or not there was a park.
So what's going to be the overall height? It looks like it's about 70 feet.
80 feet.
Okay.
It will never be lower.
It's going to be in places. So right now, the material that's on site is stockpiled in certain areas in anticipation of this moving forward. It will be regraded. There will be some additional grading and shaping, what they call grading and shaping of the landfill to accommodate good soil on top of the caps, so that there can be landscaping
I mean, you won't see the ocean,
from behind it.
no.
Yeah, because it's gonna also be probably about, what, 30 to 40 feet higher as soon as you plant the tree on top.
It's not gonna sink over time.
It does settle. Yeah, and it's designed to settle. It's settling right now. Yeah.
Not enough to.
See the ocean.
Oh, no.
But any development of the old Seacrest copy site with 8, 9 stories before you get a water view.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
You know, I haven't seen anything in connection with marine related uses. It's all about the landfill. Is there any contemplation to use the water? I
Yeah.
mean, is the water even clean?
Yeah, the water's, you can get in the water. Yeah, I mean, people go out in the water now. The problem is there's no physical connection between the water and the land. So usually, you have a landing, wharf, dock system. The shoreline, as you saw in that initial picture, is highly eroded. We're not able to, we would not get a permit to fill in that and create a bulkhead, even though there was one there at one time, to create a direct connection to the water. So it's not going to be a place where you would have marine activities. That was one of the big challenges with the Sasaki plan. The vision of that plan was to actually take the landfill and turn it into a marina. That was never possible. But it was part of the problem with that plan was it was overly aspirational. So there may be some opportunities as you get around the corner on the South Harbor side, the Saugus River, to make direct connection for small craft. But Councilor Walsh would probably have some issues with that. That sort of the prevailing wind does make it choppy. It's not an easy place to get into the water. The best place is probably up where the ferry terminal is off Blossom Street to get into the water.
So is there any plan to mitigate the erosion? With, I know at one point they were talking boardwalk and.
Yeah, so this is a decent sort of image to look at. These are just wanted to share these as precedent images to show you the types of landscape environments that would be actually on top of the landfill. On the left is Spectacle Island in the Boston Harbor. And it's been really sort of the inspiration in a very similar kind of a model for us. Spectacle Island, as you all may have known, was a landfill that was in the middle of the Boston Harbor. It suffer sort of random acts of conflagration, like fires would just not randomly happen there. But it became a solution for the Big Dig, where much of the material from the Big Dig went to cap and remove that. But what they did is they turned it into a park. And this is, if you look at on the left side here, this is essentially the topography and the landscaping of what our harbor park would look like. And then on the shoreline, you see there's a lot of riprap and a footpath. Ours is a little bit what's called hybrid restoration of the shoreline, where you would have sort of a mix of riprap or other hard infrastructure, and then sort of natural landscapes, grass, some sandy beach areas, but designed to not move. One of our ultimate objectives is that the shoreline does not erode any further than it already does.
So
I think
would
it's
it be
pretty
similar to what they did behind Breakwater?
Probably not that hard. The issue is that the state has determined that the shoreline has been naturalized. And essentially to get a permit to harden shoreline in Massachusetts right now is very difficult. But, our next step in phase 2 of this is to design and engineer the shoreline restoration that would include that hybrid.
What is riprap?
It's large rocks.
It's just cooler.
It's cooler to say riprap. I don't know why. It's riprap.
Gonna put big rocks.
Yeah. I wish I wish I threw a picture in here that sort of zeroed in into the shoreline, but you can sort of see it. It's meandering, but there are little stretches of that riprap, the rocks that are not linear but have kind of curvature to it. There are sort of other sort of breakwaters that happen in front of that to knock down the wave action, which is what causes that erosion. So it's not going to look as hard as this, but in some ways it's better for us because it creates it's a more inviting environment for a person to get up into.
What's the thought on connecting all the properties to the boardwalk? Is it natural?
Yeah, for the most part, the promenade is it would be a paved footpath. The concept does envision, so as you're coming down Hanson Street, excuse me, that's Harding. It's Harding. There, pointer here.
I'll get you in a second.
So to the left side where that dashed red line was coming out, it envisions a physical connection to the water that would include a boardwalk that could overlook the water. It could be a place for fishing. Most of the boardwalk concepts are really just a way to get out and onto the water, not as an actual way to make the pathway. The connection is really envisioned in the open space plan is at least a 15-foot wide promenade, in some places up to 25. And from this area to the right of the screen, all the way to the South Harbor and wrapping around the Saugus River would be a continual 15-foot path.
And with a bike path in front of it as well?
Yeah, it could be pedal bike. Yeah, and the concept here is that a lot of these connecting streets that come in diagonally off the Lynnway would have access points, so you could get to the park. You kind of see there's that kind of goat path that snakes its way up to the top. So you could come in from the north side, from the west side, and the east side.
Nobody lives there. This is a really remote part of Lynn.
Yeah, but that's the point. This is driving redevelopment so that people will live and work here. This is a long-term vision. Yeah, parking is on the left side. You can kind of see behind the Walmart there. There's some existing parking. There's some proposed parking to add to that. And then over on the right side, it's more linear, but there'd be parking.
There's nothing even behind what's behind there. There's the gene plant. I mean,
No,
the
you've got,
Riverworks.
so just let me jump back here to this.
This is behind Walmart.
No, yeah, I mean on the other side. So they're connecting to the other side of Lynn, but there's nothing on the other side of the. A couple of
Well, the
parking
EF
lots.
plant site is gonna be developed
So on,
behind the car dealerships.
yeah,
Any
So-
soon?
Charlie Patsio's bought it a few years back.
Yeah, yeah.
Leveled
I mean,
everything.
to redevelop an area of this scale, it's going to take multiple decades. But, you can't let the fact that there's nothing there lead you to not do anything.
No, you definitely got to plan for the future.
So there are the open space plan envisions connections across Commercial Street, brings you down to Circle Ave and provides connections there. The master plan update that I showed you envisions connections to the Gear Works site. There are, thousands of new units. There are hundreds of thousands of square feet of new commercial space envisioned in development. So there would be ample opportunity to get there. And, we want to make sure that as you come down Commercial, you have a well-connected, sort of ample public pedestrian bicycle vehicle access to the site.
Just to circle back to the Linway grant at the very beginning, is there a mental municipal plan in place that when that grant process starts to get underway, to prioritize the funding of pedestrian crossways into that grant package?
Yeah, I mean, the Linway project came out of the Lynn Transit Action Plan. It was one of the recommendations to include a center running bus lane along Linway. But it was very conceptual. There's been no designs.
Yeah,
to-
I was
to
on,
sort of
I was on
create
that committee.
Yeah, and so whatever the design process takes place, however MassDOT sets that up, I think from the city's perspective, one of our key objectives of that design process is to ensure that it's porous, that it provides multiple connections across Linway. Because the Linway right now, I don't have to tell you, is a barrier to the waterfront. It's very difficult to get from one side to the other. It's not inviting, et cetera, et cetera. For the waterfront to be truly transformational and truly a part of the Linway needs to be a connecting tissue and not a barrier. And you can do that in a number of different ways. It can be just the way that the design, include more landscape elements, more placemaking elements, but it's more opportunities for crossing to get to the waterfront from the other side of the Linway. And that would be an important aspect for us as we go through that design process. I think, I'm not going to speak for MassDOT, but they recognize the complete street standards that are coming out that are driven. It's one of their key policies is to ensure that streets aren't envisioned just as pieces of infrastructure for cars, that they need to be serving multiple users, pets, bikes, transit, and that's all part of that design thing.
What's the estimated timeline?
Yeah, thank you for the segue. Well done. So this is a view from the top of the landfill as it stands now. That will look much nicer when the park's done. But the project partnership there's about 5 different entities involved. It's the City of Lynn, Charter Environmental, who's the private entity who owns the property right now. The Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs is a partner, and Mass Development, and finally EDAC, who's a key partner in sort of contracting and construction of this, have signed the MOU, the Memorandum of Understanding, how to move forward, and that essentially sets us up to begin the permitting process to essentially design and allow for that master plan to be looked at. Charter is developing the MEPA documents, which is the first step in permitting right now, and looking to submit that this month. Once that's submitted, we expect a 6 to 9 month process to get all the permits in place. That includes a solid waste permit, Chapter 91 license, water control permit from the state, all the different, like the layer cake of permits that you need by the end of this calendar year, and construction would begin. And the first phase of the project would be delivered in 2025. And that includes the area within the red. So that's essentially the area that is the former landfill. And it would be a publicly accessible park to the community. So we're looking at that being delivered in 2025.
How do you change perception? As a lifelong Lynn resident,
Yeah.
I get down there to drop my leaves off and turn my scrap wire. And,
Yeah.
Smelly milk was down there, just terrible smell. How do we change that?
Yeah. I think that's a. I think honestly, the first thing from my perspective is the whole planning process that started with the open space master plan was aspirational, right? It envisioned a completely transformational idea for the waterfront that is very different. It's a 180 from what everybody's experienced. And as you know, a lot of people can't even picture what this waterfront looks like. Never been there. How do you get there? So first of all, you have the vision, and I think just the fact of this project happening, the fact that you're taking a landfill and turning it into a signature public park, helps with that transformation. It becomes an inviting space that can sort of demonstrate ability, capacity to transform a waterfront that benefits the community. That's a step. I'm not suggesting that this park by itself is going to transform perspectives. But that's a piece of it. But we talked about the Landmark. That project is now underway. It's going to be redevelopment for mixed-use multifamily redevelopment that syncs up with the park really nice, that's gonna be another step. That's gonna be another way of activating water. You can have people living there 24/7 accessing the park. South Harbor project that is working through the pipeline, also extending this open space and park around the corner, bringing new investment and redevelopment to that area. Iteratively, I think it shows a track record of capacity. It's like I recognize this redevelopment for the waterfront has been discussed for what, 20 years, 20 years. I can appreciate that there's some delays there, but I think this was a Hail Mary in my, when I first started. If you asked me, was this going to really happen? I would have given you low odds. But you know, I think the state recognizes this can be a model for redevelopment and transformation. It's a model of a public-private partnership, and you know, we're going to be able to take the first step in that direction. It's not going to be easy. The next phase, which is the shoreline you mentioned, Rick, that's going to be in some ways even more difficult, more costly. But I think again, you show a track record, you demonstrate capacity, ability, and you actually create the space. It'll be a first step at the very least.
Is there a concern that because there aren't pedestrian walkways in the access now, maybe not as many people, that this gets open in 2025 and then there's a complaint of we poured all this money to it, nobody using it because there's nobody, there's little people there yet.
Yeah, always worried about that a little bit, but I think the multiple access points, the scale of it, the uniqueness of it, when you get on the top of the landfill right now, you can see the opportunity. It's really hard to kind of
It's really like a distance.
absolutely, yeah, and it's the intention. It's supposed to be a park for the city. It's not a park for the waterfront residents. It's supposed to be a park for the city. The Lynn Mart projects, the first phase is expected to be delivered about the same time that the park is delivered. So that timing is actually really beneficial. You got another, yeah, and we're also, they can't get across the Lynn Way. You know, they're stuck. They're gonna have to go here. No, but just joking aside, I mean, that there's some serendipity that these two things are happening at the same time. We've got 811 Linway, another multifamily project on the other side of Linway, very close to this. Another couple hundred units. So there is a neighborhood that's growing around this park. But it's a good question to ask, because we're gonna need to program this. We're gonna have to find ways to get people down there.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say, like you can plan for that, programming events, creation.
You mean like summer weekend festival?
Yeah, festival, music.
Because people aren't gonna see it.
Trucks out there. It is, but it is exciting just to get up there. Just they did. I was on it before. It is. It's like the degree to which you quickly climb above the water and have it kind of gets flattened. I think it is really cool. It's like, oh, I can't put down here, or just have some excuse to ride a bike. Very.
Yeah, but right now you gotta park across the street.
Well, part of the first phase will include a parking lot on the site, so you won't have to park and walk very far. Yeah.
And it is one advantage of the Walmart being there is they have a massive parking lot that everyone's gonna tap into. I'm guessing.
Potentially extend to the old porthole site and beyond.
Yeah, it's again, these plans may be a little bit difficult to read at this scale, but this open space plan, sort of the key feature of it is that there is a continuous walkway for the most part along the water from Linway through the park. Thank you, Colin. It jumps up a little bit behind National Grid because we can't go on their property. Comes back around up a little bit more. Yeah, just keep following that green around, and then it comes back down to the Blossom Street Ferry Terminal, and then we'll continue along the water to Heritage State Park.
Could you go all the way to the Rotary?
Yeah, this currently exists. So
What's the status with the bike path?
The Northern Strand?
Whatever it's called, yeah.
Yeah, so the rail trail portion that's complete to Western Ave. the design plans for the on-road portion, which takes you from Western Ave, along South Common, down Market Street, and Linway, is at 100% design phase. Construction is expected to begin around 2020.
Which it actually cross. Hold on.
Market Street.
There's another spur that goes off down to where Bennett Street, I think. it is,
Correct, yeah.
basically, and go that bridge there, that it just
And
ends.
just stops. Yeah,
It's cool, it's interesting. Down there once. Didn't even know this offshoot was here. Is there any opportunity to connect that further?
I mean, that's also a big idea. Yeah, I think the challenge is where to connect it up and then getting it over the MBTA rail line, which is an active rail line. So there's elevation there you need to get up and over, right?
It's all-
But I mean, is anything possible?
Yeah.
Right.
But I think, this to your point, Chris, you could connect along the water, you could come back around and you could be on a a physically protected bike path along Linway up Market Street. And you could continue all the way down to, if you wanted to, you could go to the casino.
All right, but it's not tracking the Saugus River, for example.
Correct. It's not.
Well, it crosses by the Saugus Boston Street. It does track the river a little bit.
A little bit in Saugus, and when you come across, yeah, that's fair. Yeah, it's maybe quarter mile.
Yeah.
Incredibly complex there. Kudos. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
Amen. It's been a good project team. So, I mean, I think, from my perspective, that the funding's in place. This project is now going to happen. There's some council votes coming up. We hope to get it into the council probably February, early, maybe the second meeting in February. Some of that I do want to point out, which I failed to do earlier, is to acknowledge their partnership. So A.W. Perry, I'm going to actually go back to this image here, who owns Gorelick, is a pretty important partner to this project. So they are going to be essentially sharing an easement to the park. So the little angled area there behind the old Gorelick, about an acre of that will be sort of given over to the park to allow for some of those connections from the north side. So we have some agreement, we have some work to go through with them to come to final terms. That will be part of the council vote. Same with Lynn Water and Sewer. They're not providing access, but they're providing space for some of that grading and shaping, which is really important for the landscape piece of this. One of the things that's hard to sort of grasp in the plans that I have up here now, that hopefully we'll have a chance to share them at a later date, but there's a fair amount of landscaping going on the top of this. It's not going to be a grassy hill. It's not going to be the typical kind of landfill that you picture as you drive it out. It's going to be pretty liberally landscaped, so it'll become a nice space. And that, the partnership of Perry, Lynn Water and Sewer have really helped facilitate that, because we needed the extra area for that.
Where is the dump where you put the leaves? Is that further up or?
So this is an issue for you.
No, like.
I got a place on Salem Street where you can.
That's like first thing you moved out of there, the DPW?
No, this shouldn't affect that. No, that's off Circle Ave. That's on the
Up
other.
further
So
north?
you see where it says Lynn Water and Sewer?
Yep.
Right there. Right where that L is right along Circle Ave is where most of the lead dumping takes place. That won't be affected
So
in the
it's
short
that
term.
far- It's that far away from.
Yeah, in the short term, part of the master plan, you can see, I'm just gonna say it. This right here, that area, that's Circle Ave, that's where that leaves dumping is. That's envisioned as a relatively wide boulevard. And that's part of the connection up to Commercial Street. Yeah. I don't know what to say about the leaves at that point.
No, I.
That's
thought
several
they were
years
close-
out.
I thought they were closer to the shoreline than they are. So, yeah.
You're good for a while.
Question, if you could go back to the screen with the red box.
Yeah.
That one. You had talked about that the deliverable for the red box area is around 2025.
Yeah.
Which then implies to me that the waterfront area with the walkway and everything is going to be part of phase 2.
Correct.
I mean, I'm not the brightest guy in the world, but it seems backwards that we're going to build the sandcastle before we make the wall to stop the water.
Yeah, so,
And then the other part of that question is you also said it was fully funded, but then you also said that part two is going to be very expensive.
yeah.
So is part two also fully funded
Phase one
currently?
is just phase one, and the phasing of this is driven by the cap repair project. So the opportunity to create the park is driven by the fact that the cap had to be repaired. And so right now, what's approved for charter is just your standard cap. So it's a sort of non-woven material that sits on top of it, a couple inches of soil on top of it, you put grass. This was an opportunity while they're doing the repair to work with them to design a cap that allowed for landscaping on top. In addition, there's probably another 18 inches at least, up to 3 feet of soil on top to allow for landscaping. So the reason phase one is the landfill is because of the timing. If they were to cap it under their current permit, this project doesn't happen. There's not an opportunity to go back and redo that and rethink that just from a cost perspective and engineering perspective. So the opportunity is presented by that timing and willingness of the property and charter to actually slow down their process and work with the city and state agencies to come up with a solution. So that's why the landfill's first. Phase two then needs to be designed and engineered following that. From a sort of stormwater, sort of resiliency perspective, there is another large riprap piece hardening at the toe, and you can sort of see it here along the red dashed area. It's essentially a 30-foot tall riprap area, which is an armoring for wave action. So the landfill is not in danger of ever washing out or what have you. Our sort of interest in making sure the shoreline stops moving is twofold. If that shoreline continues to erode over decades, it could undermine that possibly. But I think more realistically for the city, that area between the shoreline and the foot of the landfill is the flatter area and sort of the opportunity for more active uses. From a park perspective.
So from a funding standpoint, we have no funding currently in place to do any of that work.
Phase two, correct.
Well, isn't it a requirement of the developers, like at the South Harbor site, that they have to put that?
They will for their site, yes, but not for the site. They don't have to fund that piece. They will on their end. They'll have to restore that. Yeah, and they're right now going through the design and engineering for that restoration, which is good for us because they basically lay the groundwork from a sort of permitting.
Question came, sorry, keep going, Rick.
I was going to say the state contributed quite a bit of money to the breakwater, the wall behind breakwater. So I think it only cost them less than half of the cost, right?
Yeah.
So is that a possibility?
Absolutely. Yeah. So the funding sources for the phase one, it's about $14 million to deliver phase one. The state is contributing 7.1, charter is contributing 4 million, and the city is contributing 3.1. 1.5 was allocated through the ARPA allocation. I think it was the first allocation.
Right, we did
allocate ARPA money that you supported
to the park.
Yeah, and that's the other vote coming up will be the remainder of that. And that's where it becomes a public-private partnership. It's,
I was more talking about the boardwalk area.
Oh yeah.
Like, so the wall was put behind breakwater. And I forget what the cost was, but I think the state ended up picking up over half of that.
Yeah, that
So
will be
is that a possibility again, to finish, as that
yes.
goes down the Linway and it's at a South Harbor site to get state funding to shore that up?
Yeah, that will be our approach.
Ryan Newhall had a question. Ryan, do you want to ask your question? And I'll ask it for him real quick. Because this project is on the Linway, do you know if this is a Lynn DPW or, I think the state is the DHC. Did I get the initials?
But Linway is DCR property.
DCR, yeah. So is this the upkeep and maintenance of this area?
Of the park?
I believe that was the question.
The park would be a city park, so the city would be maintaining it.
Duration there, I'm just curious, the cap infrastructure, you're thinking this is a long-term city asset, does the cap infrastructure go on and it settles, or is there a useful life out of that?
Yeah, 30, it's a 30-year. There's monitoring and reporting that goes over a 30-year period with the EP. So groundwater, air quality, that's going on right now. After 30 years, that stops. It's basically considered soil. And really a lot of the stuff they've been bringing in is soil. It's not what I would use to pot plants, but it's not solid waste. So yeah, we'll be part of the agreement with charters that they're forward funding and capitalizing a fund for the city to access for that O&M of the landfill components. So, you know, I think it's quarterly. We'll have to collect samples. The sampling right now pretty much shows that there's very little air. There's very little off gassing. The groundwater seems to be good. So it's not a nasty.
So that's the host vents,
It won't even have vents.
but that's the hope of the charter, is they get a sense of tie it off and back up.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. There's been.
Yeah.
Will any of the, either in phase one or phase two, is any of the land committed to something like a dog park, a skate park, or any kind of activity
Yeah.
center?
Another great segue. I think you've done it to me twice.
No, it was too much.
Yeah, so it's so on the other slide, so February 9th, we're having another public meeting to kind of just update a lot of the stuff you just heard will be provided. We are looking for some feedback on how to program some of the edge uses. So I had mentioned on the right side here, there's opportunity for active recreational. We'll be looking for feedback on what people would like to see there. I think more active, like sports courts, basketball courts.
The handball course at the court at the Rotary gets a lot of use.
Yep. And then some of the other edge uses, particularly along the waterfront or behind Walmart, could be a place where you'd have a dog park. We probably won't get too deep into programming for that because that's a long-term piece that is owned by WS Development, who is the landowner of Walmart. So there would be conversation with them. How do we think about a redevelopment of their property contributing to this in the future? But that's several years out. But yeah, that's why the edges are so important, because that's where you can sort of create some active uses, kind of sort of, you know, passive trails.
Yeah, but also goes towards making the whole site a destination, so the other side of town.
No doubt. Yeah. Yeah, right. So I don't have a time yet. It will be a virtual meeting, but February 9th, if you're interested, we can have great opportunities to provide feedback on what you'd like to see around those edges. And I see that we're getting close to 9:30, right?
Yeah.
So I did want to hit on some other sort of public infrastructure investments that are helping drive the waterfront vision. So Blossom Street, this just to kind of orient you, this map on the right here is showing you some of the connections to get across to the waterfronts and the key connections there. The arrows pointing at Blossom Street, as you all know, you cannot drive down Blossom to get to the waterfront. The city went out and got a grant through the MassWorks program for oh gosh, I want to say it was around $2.3 million to create a full intersection there. We have that designed. We'll be putting that out to a bid in the next month or so. And I would expect, hopefully by the end of this construction season, to have an intersection there. So that give you full connection to Blossom Street. Important for the ferry terminal. We get that ferry going. It's just important for road access. That's part of the vision for the waterfront. And then the second piece is we partnered with the Post Road Development at the Lynn Mart to go after another grant. Again, MassWorks. This one's about $3.2 million to rebuild Hanson Street, consistent with the design that's in the open space plan. So complete new street, new sidewalks, bike lanes, That grant is also helping fund upgrades to sewer infrastructure and electric infrastructure to support the new multifamily developments on the side of harbor.
To your point, Rick, it's a lot of state money to start to aggregate this project plus this project. It's a lot of leverage.
Yeah.
It's a lot of money.
And the point of this is really just to show that these are a series of investments that we're trying to go after as a community, with a lot of partners in City Hall, EDIC, Community Development Council, and the Mayor's Office have all been very instrumental in going out and getting this money and iteratively make those improvements, because we need the public investment to drive private investment. That's a key strategy in my view to make this actually work. And then we talked about the RAISE grant. Other than what I've already said, there's not a lot to say other than hopefully we'll have a better sense in the next 3 months from MassDOT of what that process is going to be. Our key ask to them is that they put together a good steering committee of local stakeholders to help drive the design process, and that there is robust community engagement, because although there was the transit action plan, there still needs to be continual community engagement, taking an idea from concept to design to implementation. So hopefully a couple months from now we can revisit that conversation. Sorry, I'm going to skip this next piece, which was, oh no, I'm not. I had told you, remember that break along Lynn Way where we saw there wasn't a great connection between the gear works and kind of the rest of the city. We went after a grant recently to conduct another sort of neighborhood planning process roughly in this area, so that we could take the concepts that were developed in the waterfront vision, some of the concepts that are coming out of the comprehensive plan for the Gearworks site in partnership with Mr. Patsios, to find a way to create a more comprehensive, cohesive neighborhood that ensures that the development on the south side of the Linway and the north side of the Linway are connected and are really truly a single neighborhood rather than being separated by a big piece of infrastructure. And how do we invest in public infrastructure like the flag stop at Riverworks, the MBTA commuter rail? How does that become a key driver for redevelopment on the Gearworks site? How does the Linway as a new multimodal corridor connect those two redevelopments? And what is the right land use mix and sort of redevelopment strategy there in getting into some more detailed infrastructure investments needed to carry that out? So I would expect that planning process to kick off in probably around summer. So just stay tuned with that. The last plug I want to put in, the comprehensive plan is advancing. We're getting to the more interesting part. We've got a vision in place. We had a lot of community engagement to help us understand what the vision is. There's a good existing conditions analysis on the webpage right now at lincommon.com. It's over 200 slides of data, and it was really helpful for us to sort of think about what is the vision, what are the strategies, and one of the key outcomes I think that's important for this context is that 90% of our land use in the city is residential. That is too much to that side. If you look at our peer communities, they're closer to, it's not much, doesn't sound like they're closer to 80%, 75% residential. We need to invest in commercial uses, job creation uses for a couple of reasons. One, for jobs. Another is for resilient tax base that has both commercial and residential contributing to that. So that becomes a big topic of conversation of how does that redevelop or respond to that. We have a public open house for the comp plan coming up February 7th. I just want to make sure I got my dates right here. Where are we at? Oh, I'm glad I checked. It's Saturday, February 4th, 10:30 to 12:30 at the Lynn Senior Center. We're going to be talking about some of the 38 strategies that are drafted at this point to carry out the vision of the plan. We want feedback from the community on those strategies. what should we prioritize, what should we not be, advancing. And then there are some scenario planning processes that UTL, who's our consultant, has been doing on a couple kind of key sites. One of them is Gearworks, looking at that site. What is the redevelopment strategy there in partnership again with Mr. Patsios, and then also Market Square. Market Square is an interesting place, and is sort of a model for infill redevelopment for a number of sort of commercial nodes throughout the city. So we'll be looking at some scenario planning there and looking again for feedback and how do we sort of ensure we're right sizing redevelopment, how are we rebalancing the land use to carry out those visions. So again, February 4th, 10:30 to 12:30, you can make it there. We have a survey online right now available at lynnandcom.com, asking for feedback on the 38 strategies. So please do that. It's an open enrolling survey. If you have a moment, please do that. And then the only other date to keep in mind is we have an office hours that myself, Lauren, Drago, and others will be there just to talk openly about probably whatever you want, but hopefully it's mostly about the comp plan. We'll be at the Brickyard Collaborative on the 7th between 1 and 4. So some
And you
opportunities.
said February 4th, what time?
Between 1 and 4. And you can
February
fi-
4th is 10:30 to 12:30 for the meeting, and then the open office hours for the same date,
The 7th.
February 7th, from 1 to 4 at Brickyard.
And the office hours are nice because you can come in for 5 minutes, spend your hour for 5 minutes and go, or you can stick around for the full 3 hours. If you really wish.
Anyone have any other questions for Aaron? I think he's covered quite a bit. If anybody's, to get a sense of what the park would be like, Councilor Walsh took us all out at various times on his boat to Spectacle Island, where you can dock up and walk around and, walk up, and the views are unbelievable. So that kind of gave us a sense of what this could be. Not necessarily accessing by boat, but
Yeah.
just being up there, the views are spectacular. But if you have a boat and can get out to Spectacle Island, it's really a cool spot. Aaron, thank you very much. Appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah,
Coming
my
down.
pleasure.
Folks, go online, do the surveys, go to the meetings.
The city should be proud.
I don't know how much we're gonna see in our lifetime. Maybe it'll at least be smooth enough to push our walkers. So-
There's some steep climbs.
Yeah. Put a chairlift.
Yeah.
Everybody that zoomed in, thank you for attending the meeting. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for coming this morning. See you next month.